Phoebe and Snow, Phoebe and Snow, Phoebe and Snow. Two cats ready to go. One's black, one's white. Phoebe and Snow, they know what's right. They hope that their future together is bright. They love to play. They play together every single day, wherever they go. The bond they have will not let go. Phoebe and Snow, Phoebe and Snow, Phoebe and Snow, Phoebe, Phoebe, Phoebe and Snow.
Hello, my name is Kale Burnett, and today I'm going to tell you a story. This won't be like any type of story. It won't be an old-fashioned story or a new-fashioned story. It's a timeless story. It's the story about two cats becoming friends. Our story takes place in Catville, a place full of cats, as you may have guessed. They were cats of all colors and sizes, from kids to adults to young to old. Catville was a place of harmony, and nobody ever got into fights there. Well, except for a few, because, there has to be some aggressive people out there. Anyway, but our story takes off with two cats. First, we'll talk about Phoebe Furball. Phoebe Furball was a black cat with yellow eyes and a pink nose. She was the daughter of Margaret Furball and Jet Furball. She was very sweet and had a pretty profound heart in her. She practically carried her optimism, happiness, and joy everywhere she went. Our story takes off in Phoebe's house. It is the second week of school, and it's the last full week of August. Phoebe is currently sleeping in her bed. And then Phoebe Furball woke up, suddenly. Her eyes beamed open, and she was very happy that day. She woke up, stretched her arms, and realized that it was Monday. But that didn't bother her that much, because it was still a school day. Phoebe always loved school. She woke up and then looked out the window. She could see the sun shining and see all the nature of Catville blooming. It was now the last week of August and the second week of school. So basically it was like the final few school days in August. Then Phoebe said to herself, man, I can't wait for this day. Then she decided to get up and go to the bathroom. After she went to the bathroom, she headed downstairs. She quickly rushed into the kitchen, but not in a panicky way. And she grabbed out a box of cereal called Kitty Crunch. It was one of her favorite cereals of all time. It was a very fruit-flavored cereal, shaped in the form of cats. Phoebe got out a green bowl and decided to pour her cereal into that bowl. Then she went to the fridge and grabbed some milk. After the milk, she put it back and then decided to devour the meal. While Phoebe was chewing, her mother came in and said from across the hall, "Don't forget your lunch." And so Phoebe said to her mom, Margaret, "Don't worry, Mom, I won't forget." Then after she finished eating her breakfast, she went upstairs and decided to brush her teeth. After she brushed her teeth and rinsed her mouth and flossed, and other dental hygiene things, she went back into her room just to grab her backpack. Then it was finally time to head out for the day. Phoebe came down with her red backpack on. And so Margaret and Jeff, Phoebe's mother and Phoebe's father was there. And they started to wish Phoebe a very good goodbye. Well, said Margaret, we'll miss you. We'll miss you too, said Jeff. Then Phoebe said in a very optimistic voice, don't worry guys, I'll be back soon before you know it. One of Phoebe's parents were even crying at that point. Well, just a little bit. It's not over dramatic. Then, in a heart-touching moment, Phoebe decided to give them a hug, and so the two parents of Phoebe came in, and they all hugged together. They hugged themselves together for quite a few seconds, and then Phoebe decided to head off and go out the door. She opened the door real slowly and left it. She closed the door really softly. Then it was time for Phoebe to go off to the bus stop. She really liked August a lot, especially the end of August, since it was getting near the fall in Catville. And Phoebe absolutely loved warm weather. She then headed down the bus stop, a red stop sign which it was. Then she waited there patiently, and the bus would soon arrive about a few minutes later. While the bus was coming, out of nowhere, a white cat with green eyes and a pink nose named Snow came rushing out the door. She frantically closed the door, and then rushed to the bus stop. She was kind of running a bit late. She hurriedly picked up her green backpack and put it on. She was probably gonna be late, but who can tell? Right before Phoebe was about to get on the bus, Snow also came on the bus. She said, "Whew, I made it." Meanwhile, everyone was giving her some hard looks, maybe even some sniggers, if you will. Snow soon became very nervous. She slowly walked up to the bus and saw a seat by herself. She picked in that seat and sat in there. Then the bus drove off. Snow sat in utter silence, wondering what would happen to her. She was a new kid there. She had recently come from Catville City, a faraway place, and also a subdivision of Catville. As the bus drove on for several minutes, Phoebe decided to talk to Edward. Edward was an orange cat with blue eyes and a red bow tie. Phoebe and Edward talked for a little bit while the bus was going on. "So Phoebe, what did you do this weekend?" I'm honestly not sure, but I kind of forgot," said Phoebe. "But I did have a pretty nice relaxing weekend," said Phoebe. "What did you do too?" said Phoebe. "Well, as for me, as always," said Edward, "I love to read. I've been reading a lot of classic books lately." "Ooh, that sounds interesting." Meanwhile, Snow was still in utter silence. Then she whispered to herself, "I really don't belong here." Then the bus finally drove off and entered at Catville Elementary School. It was a place where all the kindergartners to 5th graders of Cats would go to for their daily learning. Kindergarten was marked in pink rooms, 1st grade by red, 2nd grade by blue, 3rd grade by green, 4th grade by purple, and 5th grade by orange. Phoebe, Snow, and Edward were in 4th grade. And they had a teacher in room 408 called Miss Blank. She was a very nice teacher, and we'll get more into that a bit later, but for now. The bus came and parked near the school grounds. Then the bus doors opened, and soon all the kids, or cats if you will, started getting off the bus. Phoebe came off in relatively early, and so did Edward. Brittany, which we'll get into later, also came off. She was a pink cat with blue eyes and had a necklace. A silver necklace. A pearly necklace. Out of all the cats on the bus that came out, Snow was the last one to come up. She slowly walked towards Cadville Elementary School, feeling utter shame in herself. She felt like she was a burden to the school. Then, Snow went to room 408, which was Miss Blank's classroom. And from there, Snow sat in her seat and didn't say anything. The cats spent a few minutes talking to each other. Class had almost started. Then class did start, and when it did start, Miss Blank came in and closed the door real softly. She then walked into the room and said, "Hello, class. Welcome to the second week of school. I'm Miss Blank, and I believe we have a new face here." Then she pointed to Snow. "Snow," she said, "would you like to introduce yourself?" And then Snow said sure. Snow said that very nervously, but she was still committed to showing herself out there to the world and to her classmates. Then Snow stood up and started saying things. "Hello, my name is Snow Fluffers, and I am a new student here." "Ooh," said Miss Blank. "That sounds intriguing," she said. "Now where were you from?" she said. Snow answered, "From Cadville City." And we've already talked about Cadville City earlier, but to recap, Cadville City is a big, larger place than Cadville. It's full of business cats and stuff like that. We may or may not see much of Cadville City later on in this film. "Cadville City?" Miss Blank said. "That's amazing. Now, what is your favorite food?" Snow said spaghetti. Fun fact, Snow is actually an Italian kid. Mamma mia. Miss Blank replied, I like spaghetti too. In fact, I like it with meatballs and with garlic bread. Those are always delicious." "Wow," said Snow, "I'm glad to hear. Yeah, I also enjoy it with meatballs and garlic bread. It's a delicious thing." Lastly, Miss Blank asked, "What are some of your favorite hobbies?" Snow answered, I like doing a lot of things, but specifically nature things, such as going outside, going on walks, taking pictures of animals and stuff like that. That's what I really enjoy doing most." "Wow," said Miss Blank. "And do you think that you would want to do this as a career later on?" Snow said, "Maybe, but after all, I'm only in 4th grade, so I still have plenty of time to think about it." "Yes, you do," said Miss Blank. "Yes, you do. Alright, Snow, thank you so much, and you can sit down now." And without further ado, Snow sat down. Then it was time for Miss Blank to get into the lecture. "Alright, everyone," she said. "For our lesson today, we will be doing some mathematics." Edward was really happy about that, and so was Phoebe. Snow maybe a bit, but maybe just average. Miss Blank then wrote a few problems on the board. They were multiplication problems. "Alright, class," Miss Blank said. "Now we're going to be doing some multiplication problems. And I want you, this is a challenge, but I want you to try and do this using your own head." That sounded like a challenge for Snow. And so with the other cats. "Now," Miss Blank said, "who can solve this first one? 10 times 7. This one was actually very easy at Edward. Edward blurted out 70, but he did raise his hand beforehand. Great, said Miss Blank. "I'll give you an A+. Miss Blank felt happy about that. Miss Blank always gives A+ to those who participate in class. Then the next problem was 12 times 6, and then Phoebe raised her hand and said 72. And Phoebe was correct, and so she got A+ and a point. Miss Blank also liked to give points out to those who participated. When somebody participated in Miss Blank's class, they would get a point, and once they reached a certain amount of points, they would receive a gift, or a surprise. Then it came to the last equation. The last equation was 6 times 9. Then Snow raised her hand nervously, and Miss Blank called on her. Snow said 54. She said it quite a bit nervously, but she still got correct. Congratulations, Snow. A+, and the first point that you've ever gotten in this class. Snow felt really happy, and kinda almost blushed at that moment. She was a little bit embarrassed that she actually got the answer right. Some people would have even doubted her to say that she would be all the way wrong. Then the lecture was about over. Don't worry, class, said Miss Blank. For those who didn't answer, that's okay, as we will do a bit more in the weeks to follow. The class then moved on to literature and reading, and then it was time for the lunch bell, and the lunch bell rang. Phoebe, Snow, and Edward got out, but Snow was unsure where to go, so she kinda seemed to follow Edward and Phoebe. Phoebe and Edward decided to go out to the park, or the playground that is, and so Snow did the same thing too. She sat alone by herself and ate her lunch, eating a cold sandwich, a turkey sandwich, on brie bread. And the sandwich also had provolone cheese on it. Soon, Snow decided that she was actually gonna try and talk to some people and develop some of her social skills, so that way she wouldn't feel like a stranger to the class anymore. You know, she said, I think it's time for me to actually start getting some friends and to start talking to some people. So she finished her lunch quite quickly, about 5 minutes or so. Then she decided to go up and figure out how to make a friend. Since she already knew, she decided to test out with a few objects. First, she tried out to a bird. She said, "Will you be my friend?" But the bird flew away. Then she went up to a bee and said, "Would you be my friend?" But the bee flew away and also tried to sting her. Ouch. Lastly, Snow decided to talk to a rock and said to the rock, "Would you be my friend?" But the rock didn't say anything. Snow soon frowned. Then Snow was feeling very sad. "Man," she said, "I don't think I'm ever gonna get people like me here." That seemed to be the truth until Phoebe Furball came. She then tapped on Snow's shoulder and said, "Don't worry, I'll be your friend." But before that, Snow said, "Whoever it is, go away." But then Phoebe replied, "No, I'll be your friend." Then Snow slowly turned around and saw Phoebe. Snow was kinda sad at first, but she probably didn't know at that time that she was about to make a long-lasting friendship with someone she hadn't really met before. Not to even mention that she was also one of the answerers in Miss Blank's lecture. Then Snow said, "Do I know you?" And then Phoebe replied, "Yes, I do know you. My name is Phoebe Furball, and you must be Snow." Snow then lit up the room. She smiled. "Okay," said Snow, "now I do remember you." And so she did. "You're in Miss Blank's class," she said. "Yes, I am," said Phoebe. "And I can see that you're quite a bit lonely, so I wanted to offer a bit of support and help to you, and to make sure that you don't feel left out in this school. It can be a bit tough, especially when you're a new kid. I had a bit of hard times myself ever since I was a bit in kindergarten, but I soon grew and I had friends, and I've now have a pretty profoundly successful career, and I'm actually quite popular in this school." Snow replied, "Wow, that's very amazing. I know someone can actually be that popular and get all this attention." Phoebe said, "Yeah, but you'll get there one day. You'll get there." Then Phoebe and Snow decided to talk about some of their favorite things, like their favorite food, which Phoebe's was steak. And Phoebe had lived in Capital all her life. She never really visited Capital City. She did a few times, but she was mostly living in Capital. Then Phoebe's hobbies were art, drawing, drama, and other things. She was also a polymath, and so is Edward himself too. Then Phoebe and Snow talked for quite a bit more. Then they decide to give each other a handshake. "Hey Phoebe," said Snow, "is it okay if I give you a handshake?" "Sure," said Phoebe, and so the two cats did a handshake. They were now officially in unity. Then they paused for a few seconds. Then Phoebe decided to introduce Snow to Edward. "Hey Phoebe," said Snow, "is it okay if I meet Edward?" "Sure," said Phoebe. "Let's go meet Edward." And so they walked up to Edward. "Phoebe, this is Edward." Phoebe said, "Snow, this is Edward," and Edward, this is Snow. Edward said, "Hello." Snow and Edward decide to talk about the same things that Phoebe and Snow had been talking about, and also what she had shared with Miss Blank. She also made a compliment saying, "I really like your bow tie." "Oh yes," said Edward. "I've had this since I was 4 years old. It served as a cherished item of mine." And so the three cats continued to talk to each other. Then the lunch bell rang and it was time for class to begin. Then Phoebe, Snow, and Edward decided to go off into the doors of the school and head back to room 408, or Miss Blank's classroom. But while they were doing that, out of nowhere, a pink cat with blue eyes and a pearl necklace, or a pearl bracelet, actually it's a pearl bracelet, named Brittany, came out of nowhere and decided to confront the three cats. "What do you want?" said Phoebe. "Oh, I just want to see what you're up to," said Brittany. Brittany was always a sarcastic jerk to Phoebe, Snow, and Edward. Then Brittany noticed something odd. Looks like you have a new face here," she said. "Yeah, and her name is Snow," said Phoebe. "I want you to back off and get away from her." Then Brittany even tried to physically hurt Snow, Phoebe, and Edward, but then she decided that she didn't want to because she knew that she would get in trouble with it. And she also was running late for class. And also, she didn't feel like it was the right time to sabotage the three cats. Then she walked off and stormed off. Then Phoebe, Snow, and Edward went back to class and decided to stay there for the rest of the time being. Then it was time for the end of the day, and so Miss Blank wished everyone a great afternoon. And they also didn't have homework, so that even made things much more of a breeze. Then Phoebe, Snow, and Edward waved to Miss Blank, and they walked out the door. Then Phoebe, Snow, and Edward got on the bus, and Phoebe and Snow sat next to each other, and Edward sat with another of his friends. Then the bus drove off, and after a few stops and several minutes, the bus finally came back, and Phoebe and Snow got off the bus. Edward had already been dropped off at a different neighborhood since he lived somewhere else in Capital. Phoebe and Snow walked together, and then they finally came to their houses. But before they did that, they decided to sing a song, and this was the song that they decided to sing.
I was searching for a friend, but then I found you instead. I was lonely for a while, but then you made me smile. Never saw you before, just before I walked out the door. I can tell we can be friends of just you and me. We can do what we do to get anything through. Close your eyes and breathe. Your friends are just you and me. I can't wait to see just how this friendship can be. Don't have fear, don't feel drear. I can always feel you coming near. I'll be there on your side, so don't be afraid and don't hide. Just realize and see your friends are just you and me. We can do what we do to get anything through. Close your eyes and breathe. Your friends are just you and me. We can do what we do to get anything through. Close your eyes and breathe. Your friends are just you and me. Your friends are just you and me.
Afterwards, Phoebe and Snow decided to give each other not just a handshake, but also a hug. So they did a handshake, but afterwards they gave each other a big hug. And so Phoebe and Snow nearly got tears in their eyes, but they were of course maybe being a little over dramatic, because that'd be weird. And so Snow went to her house and Phoebe walked off to hers. Phoebe closed the door to her house, and she was then confronted by her mom and dad, Margaret and Jeff. "Hello," said Margaret, "how are you doing?" "I'm doing good," said Phoebe. "What's for dinner tonight?" she said. "Ooh, well, for dinner tonight," said Margaret, "we're having spaghetti." Spaghetti," said Phoebe. "That's one of Snow's favorite meals." "Wait a minute, who's Snow?" said Margaret. "Are you sure this kid's not a bad one, or a gangster?" said Jeff. "Honey, stop that," said Margaret. Okay, I was joking, said Jeff. Jeff always liked to joke and tell funny things at the table and everywhere he went to. He was a jokester, and a good companion to Phoebe whenever she felt down. He would even support them with jokes if they were ever going through a tough time. Anyway, back to Phoebe. But Phoebe said, "No, Phoebe's not any of those things. Instead, she's kinda just like me." "Oh, really?" said Mom. "Yes," said Phoebe. "Basically, she's pretty nice, and she's very into nature." "Ooh," said Mom. "That would be very nice. We haven't been in a nature walk in such a long time, and I think that'd be a great idea." "Yes, I think that'd be a great idea too, Mom," said Phoebe. "Well, I'll be in my room, and I'll be watching out from the window and playing with my toys." "Okay," said Margaret, "have fun." And so Phoebe walked off. She went inside her room and closed the door. She put her backpack down and decided to look out the window for a bit. While she was looking out the window, she saw a familiar face, and that was Snow. She was looking out the window too. Once Snow saw Phoebe, she decided to wave out the window, and so Phoebe did the same. And that's how Phoebe and Snow met each other, and that's how this brilliant friendship formed together.